Do you want to work or build with Adobe, but you're not quite sure where to start? I would love to help you out with that. Hello, fellow homesteaders. I'm Nika, and this is Bleen, the Black Queen. And today we're going to mix some mud to build a little cat house. First, you're going to want to source and sift your material. You want to avoid as much organic matter as possible, so be sure to always take out or off any topsoil that there may be. And we don't have any topsoil. We're very sandy and silty here. It is always good to try to find a nice clay pocket, but if you don't have all that clay, just sift what you got. You don't need a full wheelbarrow's worth of dirt, but since I'm doing a little cat house, I do need to make a lot of mud. In my experiences, doing little experiments with your mud mixture is the best way to see how it will perform. But you can also upcycle little plastic containers like these to create little bricks and molds to create different shapes and sizes of little mud bricks to also see how it performs that way. Though for this particular little experiment, we're going to build a little cat house using some upcycled items. This was a crate that got broken, so I kind of finished breaking off this little portion here for the entrance. And I gave it a nice rock platform for drainage, a little bit more thermal mass, and those kinds of aspects. But I'm going to show you how I'm going to create the mud to mud it with plastic bottles, a lot like all the bottle walls and can walls that I have done. Now for this very first test mixture, we want nothing in it except the dirt we have sifted. And we want to make it a very, very thick mud mixture. You're going to want to start off by adding just a little bit of water at a time. Of course, if it gets too soupy, you can add more of the sifted mixture to thicken it up. And my mixing method is to add the water, mix the material until it looks more dry than it is wet. Now the majority of the water has been absorbed, and now I'm going to add a little bit more water. Now I'm going to mix and pull all this kind of wetted material through that water. And so I don't add too much extra water, I'm going to keep mixing this wetted dirt back and forth in that same manner until it seems that the moisture is kind of consistent through the pile, so I can decide if I want to add more water or not. It's also very good that as you're mixing, you're kind of digging your fingers in and squeezing the material to move that moisture throughout. It's almost like kneading dough. And as you go back and forth, it's kind of this cut in method and squishing that material together as you mix to really make sure you're getting everything well mixed and everything's absorbing any extra water that's in there. Now that I've mixed it a couple times, I do know that there's enough moisture within this dirt and mud that I just need to mix it a little bit more to get it all the same thick consistency. Now the reasoning behind trying to create a really thick mud mixture with little extra water is because water takes up space. And the more water you have in your mixture, it has the potential to create more space as that water dries out, leading to more cracking. So to avoid cracking, you do want to create a thicker mud mixture, but it does kind of depend on the project. You may need thinner mud at times, but again, that is where this type of experimenting comes in. And now that it's all mixed, I do want to let it set and chill for just a little bit, so all the water can really have a chance to saturate all the bits of dirt in there nice and thoroughly. You don't want any little dry crumbles in your mix. It's not detrimental, but you do want to avoid it. And letting it set will help with that possibility. And now that your mud mix has sat for a little while, let's do some molding of some bricks. So I'm just gonna take some mud a little bit at a time, and we're gonna fill our mold. And you wanna do a little bit at a time so you can get any of the air bubbles out from in there. So you add some and you press it in very well. Add some more and see how thick this is? It's very thick, very stable in a sense on its own. So this is a very good thick mixture. We're gonna keep putting it in here, mushing it, making sure there's no air bubbles. And I'm gonna make it smooth with the top of this. There's one mold. And now we'll do a thinner little square mold. Pretty much the same thing. You're gonna add some, press it in. And the pressing is also important because it helps compact all the little particles within your mud. Now, depending on the mold itself, sometimes you can flip it and maybe wiggle out your mud, but our mud is very, very sticky. So I like to actually let them dry for a little bit, maybe a couple of days, before I try to knock them out. But we're gonna set those aside for now and get working on this cat house. So I got a big old glob of mud that I'm gonna start off with just covering these rocks. I'm not trying to really fill in the space between them, but put a nice fat, thick mud layer on top of them. Tapping and smacking is a very good way to kind of smooth and level out the mud, as well as get any air bubbles out that may be in there. So now that the platform is all done, the little basket is situated, we're gonna start with plastic bottles and mud around the outsides. And again, I'm gonna start with a mud platform, some recycled bottles. We're gonna mush it into that platform. Try to keep everything even where I need it. Sometimes you gotta hold and shimmy a bit. And this extra mud that squishes out, I'm gonna scrape it off. Gonna kind of roll it a bit, create another platform. Now you do want to try to leave a bit of a mud ledge here, just so that the bottom is wider than the wall that's gonna come up. But you can also add more mud later as well. But you definitely want the platform to kind of flare out. Gonna keep going up with bottles. And sometimes what you can do if you don't have a lot of squish space to squish material between the bottles, you can always either put a glop of mud on the end of the bottle or the bottom of the previous bottle, so that when you set it down and squish it in, there's plenty of mud between them. And just like all the other mud working, you gotta work the mud to how you need it. Squish some in some places, and just make sure it fills everywhere you need, and that there's enough mud here that it kind of curls over both the bottles, at least a little. And another reason really thick mud is nice is when doing a project like this, if this mud was too thin, it would just kind of fall through all these holes, or something to that effect where it kind of falls and goops through the project. So really thick mud is really nice to work with. So if you're familiar with working with clay, a good thick mud, no matter, for the most part, no matter the consistency, will give you a very clay-like mud. These bottles are actually pretty perfect because the next bottle is gonna line up nice with the top layer of bottles. So now it's gonna be the same thing, a platform of mud and creating the bottles across the top. Making sure to squish up mud against the bottle next to it so that when I squish it down, there's mud between them. Now I'm gonna work down the other side. Now to work this little end piece and the back. And what's nice with bottles is you can always use them whichever way you need to. So we'll do this for these ones. And always pressing from the other side can be very helpful. Any mud that fell through on the inside, I'm gonna smack it into the mud platform that's in there. As well as I'm going to smooth the mud that's kind of squishing through the grate. I'm also adding some mud to the inside to smooth things out, but I do need the mud to be a little thinner, so I'm just gonna dip my hand in some water, take a handful of mud, and mix it up. And that's all it took, was dipping my hand in water to make a very much thinner and gooier type of mud mixture. So it doesn't take a lot of water to make it gooey. So the inside's all smooth, but I'm just about out of mud. It's funny because you can think you made plenty of mud and you still end up short. So I'm going to use what I have left to kind of start covering these bottles, and then I'll go mix some more. I got more mud mixed, so let's encase this whole thing. And just like with the bottle walls, making sure that you're slapping the mud and kind of pulling up or kind of across to smooth things out. Now I'm not trying to do a super fat layer, but I do want a decent layer on things so it doesn't dry out too fast. I usually go around at least a ½ inch to an inch thick. Around an inch is kind of the best. For the most part, most mud mixes should be able to create kind of the shapes that you want to, as long as it's nice and thick. But take your time, be patient to create the shape that you're wanting to experiment with. So once you get the basic shape all kind of made, you take water, you dump it on top, not a whole lot, but just move that water around and smooth out your surface and make it as even as you can or want it to be. But this is where some real fun and creativity can come in. And we're very fortunate that our mud mix is very clay-like. So it's very fun and moldable, and it's great to be able to create shapes and curves. We now have a cat house. So I gotta be honest with you, I'm not entirely sure how this little cat house is going to turn out. I have yet to do a just mud project like this, especially outside in the sun. So this is an experiment for me, as well as sharing ideas of how to experiment. I did get a little crazy and had a little fun with it, but this is how you learn how to work with Adobe, how to figure out textures, consistencies, how wet you need it, how to smooth it out, and there's a zillion little things that you can build in this sort of fashion. And I do have a basic idea of what is going to happen as this mud dries. One of the things I do know is I'm going to have some extra cracking because it is freezing at night. But that's okay, because it's good to know what a mud project like this is going to do with some freezing temperatures. But we'll check in tomorrow and see how she does. Hopefully it dries real well, because it's just too cute. Peace.